Welcome to chapter 32 of the book of 2Chronicles, the last chapter on the great king Hezekiah, and it begins in chapter 1. And after these words, logos, and this truth, came Sennacherib Vasilev Assyrion, and came unto Judah. This Sennacherib, before Sennacherib, this came I believe his grandfather, or at least king before before him, was called Shalmaneser. And let's go down to our Wikipedia, and we see here an article on this Shalmaneser. And Shalmaneser was also from Assyria, and he came into against the kingdom of Israel and Samaria, and defeated them and took many captives and moved them away. But now we have this Sennacherib, and I think I got it mixed up, and I thought it was Sennacherib who came against Israel in a video before this one. But the Sennacherib now is from same place, Assyria, and the capital was Nineveh. Let's go down and we'll see a map there. Here it is here. Here's Assyria. Babylon is down here. In 689, Sennacherib attacked Babylon and destroyed the city. This was before Babylon became more powerful after the fall of Assyria. But Assyria, you can see, came all the way around. Here is the Tigris, and this is the Euphrates River. It comes all the way around. This is called the Fertile Crescent, where people came from the Babylon and the Mesopotamia, like Ur and the Chaldees was here with Abraham, and they came around with this river, and then they came down to the ocean and down Tyre and Sidon and so forth into Jerusalem. And this is what Sennacherib is doing. And a lot of the things that are going on now in this chapter are in the book of 2 Kings, more in detail. Isaiah the prophet shows up in 2 Kings quite a bit with the stories with Hezekiah. But first, Hezekiah tries to buy off Sennacherib when he's coming attacking him, and this is in 2 Kings 18, 14, verses 14 to 16. You can see what all the things that he did to buy Sennacherib off, but it's not mentioned in Chronicles. So he came unto Judah, and he camped about the walled cities, and spoke at first to take them. And those are all the cities that had been set up by Hezekiah's forefathers, and walled them, Solomon, and so forth. And Hezekiah beheld that Sennacherib comes. In his face, Sennacherib's was to wage war against Jerusalem. And he Hezekiah consulted with his elders, presbyteron as an elder, polemise, the polemics has to do with war, words. He consulted with his elders, and dynamite, mighty ones, to obstruct the waters of the springs, which was outside the city, and they vigorously assisted him. Now, it's talking about the spring of Gihon. Let's go find that on, it's on Wiki. So we go to this one, and we have the Siloam Tunnel. So the spring came up, is down below, and so Hezekiah made this tunnel so it would go into eventually the pool of Siloam. The pool of Siloam, and this is a picture of it that they've taken today that's still there. And so Hezekiah, they had dug this tunnel to divert the water so that Sennacherib would not have any water when he came to Jerusalem. And he brought together many people and they obstructed the waters of the springs, the spring of Gihon, and the rushing stream separating through the city. And apparently Jerusalem with these springs is one of the largest springs in the world. I was reading about it, and that it was easily able to give enough water to the people of Jerusalem, and also to give them irrigation to a certain extent. And he brought the people, and he was saying, should the king of the Assyrians come and find much water and grow strong? No, he doesn't want that to happen. And Hezekiah strengthened himself and built up every wall, having been raised, and towers, and another wall around. And he strengthened the elevation of the city of David, and carefully prepared many weapons. So we can go here to preview, and the next one is Jerusalem. So here's Jerusalem, here's the temple and the old part of the city of David, and Ophel, and different parts in this wall that was around it, so forth. So this is what Sennacherib is coming against. And Hezekiah, put rulers of war over the people, and they were brought together to him upon the square of the gate of the city. So that was one of the gates, which it doesn't say. And he spoke unto their heart, saying, be strong and be manly. Fear not, nor be terrified from the face of the king of Assyria, nor from the face of any of the nations with him. So, I was going through this, the Bible here, and a lot of people would think, well, everything in here is all stuff that happened thousands of years ago. Why even bother? Because we don't bother with a lot of learning things that happened 500 years ago in the United States. It's like somewhat interesting, but why would you spend a lot of time? Well, I believe by going through the Bible, in every chapter you'll learn something, some spiritual gift from God that we will learn from every chapter that's in the Bible. Things that happened to people before. If we look at it in a spiritual way and try to glean from God's word of what he would impart to us today in the 21st century, and maybe further people that are watching. So here is fear not, nor be terrified from the king of Assyria. So when we're walking with the Lord, then fear, it's still there, of course, but we have the hope and the comfort of knowing that the Lord is in charge of everything. And if God is in charge, and you really know that and you feel that, then whatever happens is going to happen. God is going to allow it, and how it affects you and me are very different ways. There's all kinds of things to fear. Fear of death, fear of health problems when you get old, fear of you're young and in high school of somebody bullying you, or fear of not finding a mate, either a male or a female, or a fear of a failed marriage, a fear of failed finances. The list goes on and on, right? We could write down a giant list of all the things that we can fear. But saying fear not, phobithete, phobia is the derivative from this word, fearing. So don't fear. Why? For, Hezekiah says, with us are more over the ones with him. Now, I'm not sure if it's in 2 Kings here where they, I believe it is, where the prophet tells them there's more people with us than there is with them. And he's, how can that be? There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of them. And the prophet asked to open the eyes of the king. I'm not sure if it was Hezekiah or not, but anyway, to open the eyes of the king. And as he saw all these fires from the army of God, which was much, much more. So we have God to protect us in ways. Sometimes it's in war and battle, and other ways, health and so forth. We just need to be in communication with him, pray to him constantly. And then Hezekiah says, with him are arms of flesh, that is with Sennacherib. He's got an army arms of flesh. But with us is the Lord our God, to deliver and to wage our war. God, our God, is a God of spirit, a Holy Spirit, and He is, and as I mentioned before, the word spirit is pneuma, and pneumatics comes from that, the English word pneumatics, which operates heavy equipment. It can lift up buildings with air pressure. So the pressure, the Spirit of God is a very powerful thing to deliver us and to wage the wars and battles that we have. And the people relied with confidence upon the words of Hezekiah, Vasileos Judah. And after these things, Sennacherib, Vasilevs, Assyrion, Apostole, sent. We have an apostle. The Apostolic Bible comes from that. Sent his servants unto Jerusalem. And we know that that was Rabsakes was the main one, and Tartan was another, and Rabshakeh or something, different names. They're in 2 Kings. And he was by Lachish and all his military with him. So let's go down to the map, and we'll find the next one is, let's see where it's at, over here, preview. Here it is. We go to Assyria. The Lachish. Oh, that's not the right map. Let me find it here. There it is. Okay, so here we have Lachish right here, and you can see Jerusalem is just west of Jerusalem. So Shalmaneser took all these cities, which he had earlier taken with his grandfather, Shalmaneser. So it was easy for him to come all the way down against Jerusalem. Couldn't get bought off, so he wanted to take Jerusalem. And so the army then, his army was there in Lachish. And he sent to Hezekiah, king of Judah, and to all Judah in Jerusalem, which a lot of people fled into the city, saying, well, thus says Sennacherib Vasilevs Assyrion, upon whom do you rely, that you settle in the stronghold of Jerusalem? Well, we could ask the same thing. I could ask, who do I rely upon? Well, if you're relying upon, if you're not relying upon God, then, as I mentioned, a famous psychiatrist, was Carl Jung, was it? A protege of Sigmund Freud, who was a psychoanalyst, which was just a bunch of malarkey, but this Jung lived quite a bit later until where they were doing filming, and they filmed him. It's on YouTube. And he mentioned that if you don't have God to rely upon or to believe in, then the next best thing is government. So I look at today in the United States in 2017 that we rely upon government. The President of the United States just had a major speech yesterday to the United Nations, and it was really a wonderful speech, but there was nothing really in it but about God. And it was all about how government and how capitalism is better than socialism, which may and may not be. But some of the socialist countries, for some reason, decide to get rid of God in their system. And that's what the communists did. They became atheistic. And Cuba and China and all these communist countries became atheistic. Now, why, when they become socialistic, communistic countries, they want to get rid of God? I'm not exactly sure. I suppose we could study that. But now the reason I believe the fall of communist Soviet Union, it wasn't at all because of the failure of the system. It was because of their atheism and being against God. They were fighting against God. And if we just depend on our economy and a strong government, it could fall very easily, or your government could fall very easily. So who do we depend upon? In verse 11, Sennacherib or Rabshakeh continues with this letter, reading it out loud at the somewhere at that wall of the city. He says, has not Hezekiah deceived you to deliver you into thanaton, death, thanatology is study of death, and into hunger and into thirst? Because all these people were starving and he didn't know about the thirst, I'm supposed. They didn't have thirst because they had this water, but saying, the Lord our God shall deliver us from the hand of the king of Assyria. So Rabshakeh is saying, isn't he deceiving you? Is this not Hezekiah who removed his altars? Now, his altars is not the God of Israel, but he removed the altars of the king of Assyria, because the previous king, was it Ahaz, brought down these idols from Damascus, which was taken over by Assyria. Is this not Hezekiah who removed the king of Assyria's altars mainly, and his high places, and said to Judah, to the ones dwelling in Jerusalem, saying, behold, this altar you shall do obeisance, and upon it burn incense? And that's correct, the altar in Jerusalem. Rabshakeh is right. And then he continues, do you not know what I and my fathers did, as he's reading this letter? Sennacherib and my fathers did to all the peoples of the places. Yeah, he took them away. They all were taken away because they were not believing in Jehovah, God. They were believing in the golden calves. In being able were the gods of the nations of all the earth able to deliver their people from out of my hand. Well, that's a very good argument he can put it up today too. If it seems like the gods of a nation that's not following our God, Jesus, Jehovah God, then can they take over? Is God going to deliver us? I believe he will. But if the people are truly following him, if the people are not following him, then all bets are off. He may and may not. Who among all the gods of these nations which my fathers utterly destroyed, who is able to rescue his people from out of my hand? That your God should deliver you from out of my hand. So we can be attacked by Islam, by Buddhists. I don't know too many Buddhists that go around attacking anybody, or Hindus, maybe in India they do, but as far as spiritually attacking, now they're coming into the United States, but the United States is giving up on Christ, basically, and allowing this to happen. So it's all open to these people. But these nations are not able to defeat God if he doesn't allow it to happen. He doesn't want it to happen. Now, sometimes there's two countries that are both, like, say, Christian, like Germany in the Second World War was a Christian country, and so was France, and so was England and Poland, and they were all, even the Soviet Union. It was the Soviet. Before that, it was Russia with the Tsars and Eastern Russian Orthodox. They were all Christian, but they still fought with each other. So then it changes the dynamics. When one Christian is fighting the other Christian, they shouldn't be doing that. So there you go. I don't know how God decides who's going to win and who's going to lose when it comes to fighting brethren. And now let not Hezekiah deceive you, and not persuade you to do according to these things. And do not trust in him. So basically give up. Open the gates and let us come in. For in no way was a God of any nation and kingdom able to deliver his people from out of my hand, and from out of the hand of my fathers. So, wow, that's a strong argument for somebody to, if it was a Christian country, but yet you were overrun by these people, the infidels, then it's kind of a sad state. And that happened in history a couple of times where the Muslims were attacking the Christian countries. and were defeated by much smaller armies. In Vienna, and trying to think of the other place with, they call him the Hammer, the father, I think, of Charlemagne, Charles Martel. Where was that? Algiers, something like that. I think that might have been even in France. I'm not sure, but these huge Muslim armies were completely defeated, and they didn't come against these areas for thousands of years until these countries went in and took over these other countries. Through the Second World War, all of the Muslim countries were pretty much all taken over by Western countries, but now the Western countries are giving up and allowing the Muslims to come in. It's a sad, 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 sad state. But God is allowing it, and this is what happens when people walk away from God. And he continues, "For in no way shall your God deliver you from out of my Sennacherib's hand." And still his servants spoke against the Lord God and against Hezekiah his servant. So they're still out there raging, and they're even talking in Hebrew, and Hezekiah asks them not to speak in Hebrew, but they don't. They keep talking, trying to demoralize the Jews in Jerusalem. And Sennacherib, wrote a Vivion, a scroll, Bible, it comes from that word, to berate the Lord God of Israel. And he said concerning him, saying, well, as the gods of the nations of the earth did not rescue their people from out of my hand, so in no way shall the God of Hezekiah rescue his people from out of my hand. Well, that's an argument the devil has today. It's like basically if you see somebody else falling that may be in the same social status of you or in the same area, doesn't mean you are going to have the same thing if you're walking with Christ, I believe. It will be different. I believe that many people will be protected and saved. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but they will, and the rescue by God of his people is going to happen here. And they yelled out with a great voice in Jewish unto the people of Jerusalem upon the wall to make them afraid of them, and to tear them down so as to first take the city. That isn't here. I thought it was just in 2 Kings. That would be in 2 Kings 19 also. So basically, the devil is instilling fear in us, and doubt and fear. And doubt with Eve, when he said, does God really say you can't do this and so forth, and fear causes, he's there to condemn us, Satan, and cause fear. And we can fear, then we don't seek God. If we don't seek God, then we're vulnerable. And basically the city would have been vulnerable except for good King Hezekiah. And because Hezekiah now brings in Isaiah, as we see it, and Sennacherib spoke against the God of Jerusalem, as also against the gods of the peoples of the land, the works of the hands of men. So here we have a differentiation in the Bible. He spoke against the God of Israel, Jerusalem, as also the gods of the peoples of the land, the works of the hands of men. The God of Jerusalem is not the works of the hands of men. He is a spiritual being. The only other small g God that would be compared that was spiritual would be Allah, which is not today any type of an idol. It may have started that way. I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert on Islam, and I don't even like talking about it because I know nothing about it. I know what God is, so that's all I need to know. But the works of men's hands, especially with idols, when it comes to like Buddhas and animal-type gods that look, monkeys and statues and all sorts of things that Hindus have, and these are the works of hands of men. And Hezekiah the king, the Vasilevs, prayed, and Isaiah, son of Amos, O prophetes, concerning these things. So and I think in Kings it shows Hezekiah read this to Isaiah, the letter, and so it says, and the Lord sent an angel, and he obliterated every mighty warrior. And 21 goes in, 2 Kings goes into this more. And ruler, and commandment in the Paranvoi, in the camp of the Basileos Assur. And he returned, Sennacherib returned with shame of face into his land, and he entered into the house of his God. And some of the ones coming forth from out of his belly threw him down by the broadsword, and his belly being his son. And our sons, exactly, they don't really know for sure, but and the Lord delivered Hezekiah and the ones dwelling in Jerusalem from out of the hand of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, Sennacherib, Basileos Assur, and from out of the hand of all, and rested them round about. So Jerusalem was delivered. And many brought gifts to the Lord in Jerusalem, and presents to Hezekiah, king of Judah. So all this money started coming in, flowing in. And he was elevated in the ophthalmos, the eyes, ophthalmologist, comes from that, of all the ethnon, nations, ethnic derivative, after these things. In those days, Hezekiah, actually 23 here, so he becomes very elevated, powerful, then becomes prideful, as we find out. In those days, Hezekiah became ill unto death. And this goes into detail in 2 Kings 20, 9-11. And he prayed to the Lord, and he heeded him and gave to him a sign. And that sign were the shadow going back 10 stairs. And you can read about that in the book of 2 Kings. And Hezekiah rendered not according to the recompense which he recompensed, but exalted his heart. He didn't give God the glory. He exalted his heart at this period of time. And wrath came upon him. Ooh. So if you're exalting yourself, everything is going good. Well, that's the old mountain to the desert feeling. I used to go to these retreats, and you go up to where I went up to the mountain. You had a wonderful retreat there, all the men's retreat. Everybody's praising God and loving everybody and reading the Bible and singing songs. And it was just like, wow, you're just on top of the world. Like, this is like heaven's basement. And then you go back down and you go to reality with your family, your friends, your job, and everything, all your problems. And then all of a sudden, you are changed and you're at the bottom again. It's just like a roller coaster ride sometimes with walking with the Lord. It's ups and downs. So here he was recompensed, but then he became exalted, and the wrath came upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem from the actions that he did. And Hezekiah was humbled from the haughtiness of his heart. So he was humbled. So he realized, that this condition, and he and the ones dwelling in Jerusalem. But the wrath of the Lord did not come upon them in the days of Hezekiah. So you can go read more about this in the Second Kings chapter, I think, 20. And there came to Hezekiah Plutos. We have the star Pluto comes from that, rich. It means rich. And doxology from the liturgy of glory. And much exceedingly came to him. And he made to him a thesaurus. A thesaurus comes from that, a treasury. And the thesaurus is a treasury of words. Of silver, argyriu, and chryseu, and lethu, stone, valuable stone. And for aromata, we have a transliteration into aromatics. There is a transliteration. So many words of the Greek are turned into English. And you see these in our English derivatives book, which is available on our bookstore. And he made armories for the arms and storehouses for all the items of the desire, wonderful things, and cities for the produce of the grain, and wine, and olive oil, and stables for every beast, and havens for the flock. So he had everything. It names it all here. I mean, you can, all the foods and the animals and cities. And he made cities for himself and possessions of sheep and oxen in abundance. For the Lord gave to him exceedingly vast belongings. And Hezekiah himself, so now this goes back up to the beginning where he did this before the attack of Sennacherib, but it mentions it here for some reason towards the at the end where I had that picture of the tunnel that he made. Hezekiah himself obstructed the Exodus is a derivative of the water of Gihon, that was the spring of the upper part, and straightened it below, that is the tunnel, to the west of the Polio, city of David. And the way of Hezekiah was prospered in all his works. And thus, in the manners concerning the ambassadors of the rulers of the ones in Babylon, Babylonos. Now, ones from Babylon came across and to Jerusalem, being sent to him to inquire of him about the miracle which took place in the land, probably the defeat of Sennacherib, who had defeated Babylon just right earlier than this, destroyed the city. So they probably wanted to come out and find out how they can destroy Sennacherib, which eventually they did, took over Assyria. That the Lord abandoned him, Sennacherib, to test him. Abandoned Hezekiah to test him to know the things in his heart. Well, I don't know if the Babylonians wanted to really know that, but it mentions that here. This things happened with the Babylon coming and inquiring. And then it states that there was a miracle. The miracle, maybe instead of about, I should take that out and make a dash. The miracle which took place in the land that the Lord God abandoned to test him to know the things in his heart. Well, that's why you go, wow. Why would the Lord abandon to test? Well, so that shows that even when you're walking with the Lord, the tests do come, because in the Lord's Prayer, Lord, lead us not to the test, deliver us from the evil. Jesus has that. And he tells people to pray and not to be put to the test. And the proof of the test is in Mark 15:34, where it says, Jesus says on the cross, my God, for why did you abandon me? So Jesus felt there was an abandon. So the Lord abandoned him, and the Lord abandoned Jesus. And then in Psalms 22:1, it says, oh God, my God, take heed to me. Why did you abandon me? So David felt abandoned, Jesus. So does God actually abandon us? And what does abandoning mean? I mean, does he completely walk away? I don't think so. I think he just allows the devil to do his testing, because basically Jesus was tested by the devil in the wilderness. So God, in a way, is when he's not there, and the evil, the tester is the devil. He's the one doing the testing, and the King James calls it tempting, but it's the same word. Test and tempt is the same Greek word. So when the tester comes, then God lets him do that, to know the things in his heart. Because if we didn't have a test, then who does it to know the things in his heart? Well, God knows our heart. He doesn't have to test us, I wouldn't think, but yet he does. So I'm not sure on that, but definitely we learn what's in our heart. Because if we take a test, like I was in mathematics, I'm terrible at math. In high school, we had to take these tests, and I got back the results, and I was like 20%, down to 20% for mathematics. And so I knew I was terrible at mathematics. So I knew it, and the professor knew it, and the people that were directing me to where what do they call them, advisor, what I might do. He said, well, don't go to college, get a job, because I was good at doing quick I was not good like in geometry, trigonometry, anything like that, zilch. I could add and subtract and real fast. So he said, you might want to get a job doing something like in accounting. Well, you might say, well, if you're not good in math, then why were you good in accounting? Well, it's not quite the same thing. I mean, mathematics, algebra, I hope you understand. If you don't know math, and you wouldn't, well, you'd be like me, ignorant. But to know the things in, so the professor knows, and this man told me, well, don't go out and get a job as anything to do with, you go to college. Well, I did go to college, but I ended up flunking out because I was so bad in foreign languages. I flunked German twice, and so that was the end. And I got out. Then years later, I translated the Bible in Greek. Go figure. The power of God, the pneuma. And the rest of the words of Hezekiah and his mercies, behold, they are written in the prophecy of Isaiah son of Amos, the prophet, and upon the Viblio of Basileon of Judah and Israel, and that would be 2 Kings, so you can go into Isaiah and then 2 Kings. We're going to go into Isaiah next, I think right after this chapter. We'll go into Isaiah because he's here now, and we'll see what Isaiah is talking about. And Isaiah was around for 3 or 4, I think it was more than just this one king. And Hezekiah slept with his pateron, fathers, paternal, is derivative, and they entombed him in the ascent of the burying places of the sons of David in Jerusalem, and glory and honor they gave to him in his death, which he deserved, even all Judah, and the ones dwelling in Jerusalem. And Manasseh his son reigned instead of him. We go into the 33rd chapter after Isaiah with Manasseh, and now Jeremiah appears, I believe, after Manasseh, and the next king after Manasseh, then the third king after, then Jeremiah appears until the end. So we will go into Isaiah next, and then we'll pick up with chapter 33 and the next 2 Kings, wherever chapters those are, in 2 Chronicles, and then all the way to the end, and then Jeremiah, and then after that Ezekiel. So hope you'll join us in the book of Isaiah, and God bless.